findings of our study which we conducted in 2015, which is entitled Keeping the Faith, named after me, Study of Freedom of Thought, Conscience, and Religion in ASEAN. As promised in the agenda, I will try to highlight good practices later on towards the end of the presentation. Okay, so first I wanted to share why we conducted the study. So this study is inspired by the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration. So in 2012, the heads of state of ASEAN put out an ASEAN Human Rights Declaration affirming and committing to respect, promote, and protect human rights. So among the declarations was this. It said that every person has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. All forms of intolerance, discrimination, and incitement of hatred based on religion and beliefs shall be eliminated. So we thought that this is an admirable aspiration because it sets the bar high. It's all forms of intolerance, discrimination, and incitement of hatred based on religion and belief will be eliminated. So we thought it was really good. And we wanted to see what we are doing as individual member states to reach this situation where the right to freedom of religion and belief is respected. So how did we write the report and who wrote the report? So the book is comprised of 10 country reports, one for each member state of ASEAN. Each report was written by a country report, as much as a country researcher. As much as possible, we try to get somebody from within that country, a citizen of that country, to write that report. This is so that he or she will be aware of the nuances with regard to freedom of religion in that country, and also for practical reasons, because he or she will not have to face language barriers, and he would know the organizations to approach to. And also another reason for doing that is because the HRRC tries to build the capacity and the network of ASEAN researchers. So for this study, we were able to get citizens from the ASEAN states except for 2 countries, for Laos, PDR, and for Brunei. For these countries, we had to hire a citizen from outside to write those reports. However, to highlight the sensitivity of the issue, around 4 country researchers, I believe, wrote anonymously. So you can see that it's still a sensitive topic, and although we might be able to find researchers to write, they might not be so willing to put themselves out and would like to be protected against retaliation. The country reports are divided as follows. The first part talks about legislative and policy framework, and then it goes into the trends relating to freedom of religion and belief. So we'll look at laws and changes in policies. We'll look at changes with regard to enforcement of the laws. We also highlight events of persecution and also of interreligious conflict. Then we'll look at contributing factors. With all of this information from the 10 ASEAN member states, we had a lead researcher, Dr. Jacqueline Neo, who is a Malaysian who teaches at the National University of Singapore. She wrote the synthesis report, which highlights regional trends. So I didn't write the entire book, but HRRC helped throughout the process with regard to editing, and also we had advisors who oversaw and approved the final report. Okay, so moving on. Wait, what happened? Okay, let me go. Sorry. Okay, let me see. Okay, it's working now. I got scared of you. So next, I'd like to talk about the overview of state-religion relationship in ASEAN as contained in the constitutions of the 10 ASEAN member states. So before you is a table containing the constitutional protection of freedom of religion as contained in the constitution of ASEAN countries. So you will see that ASEAN is very strongly committed to protecting religious freedom. Many of these countries recognize that freedom of religion or belief is a right. So they use strong words to say that the country guarantees this right. People shall respect this right. The exception to this is Brunei Darussalam. As you will see in the chart, Brunei chooses to adopt a softer language. It says that the official religion of Brunei Darussalam shall be the Islamic religion. All other religions may be practiced in peace and harmony by persons professing them. So if you look at the other boxes, you will see that other countries, they use the words shall, use the word guarantee, and they specify that this is a right. All right. And then we also look at declared state-religion relationship. So we found out that there are 5 countries in ASEAN that explicitly or implicitly favor a religion or declare it as a state religion. So for Brunei Darussalam, it's clear that the state religion is Islam. For Cambodia, the state religion is Buddhism. For Malaysia, it says in their constitution that Islam is the religion of the federation. Myanmar and Thailand, the constitution of these two countries both recognize the importance of Buddhism as the faith that is followed by majority of the population, but they stop short of calling it as a state religion. Indonesia, the constitution says that the state shall be based upon the belief in the one and only God. So it does not mention a specific religion. However, as you will see, it does advocate for monotheistic belief, and also you have to believe in a God, so it doesn't really encourage atheism. In Laos, PDR, Singapore, and Vietnam, the constitutions do not mention any religion, any specific relation between the state and religion. But in Singapore, what was observed is that secularism, for instance, is widely used. The Philippines is unique in that it is the only country in ASEAN that provides explicitly for the separation of church and state. So the Constitution of the Philippines says the separation of church and state shall be inviolable. Now, although I divided the countries, I should just like to point out that it doesn't mean that if you're in the yellow section, that you already are violative, that there's religious conflict in your country, or that you violate religious freedom. And for instance, in Cambodia, Buddhism is declared as a state religion, but even the Islam Mufti has said that they are able to practice their religion without any hindrance from the state. Okay, so the report highlights countries that are facing challenges with regard to keeping the harmony among the different religions. And here I just like to say already that I will be mentioning bad things about some of your countries, but the report does contain good things. It's just that for the interest of time, I'll be highlighting examples that show challenges with regard to intra and inter-religious harmony. So the first country that we highlighted, the report highlighted, is Malaysia. So we noted that in ASEAN, conflict not only occurs among the different religions, but it can also happen within one religion itself. So in Malaysia, we noted that it's difficult for you to convert out of your religion. If you want to convert out of religion, if you want to convert out of Islam, some of people may be detained for rehabilitation, for religious rehabilitation. And we also noted that non-Orthodox or non-Sunni Islamic groups have been tagged as heretical or teaching deviant teachings. This included Shia, a cult called the Sky Kingdom, and also the Al-Arqam group. Also, with regard to non-Muslim religious minorities, the report noted some incidences of symbolic violence through demolition of places of worship. So the report noted that in the last 10 years, around 6 churches built by indigenous communities were demolished, and around a dozen Hindu temples were demolished also within that 10-year period. This included a 1,200-year-old Chandi or tomb temple in Bujang, Bali. So where they demolished the ruins of a Chandi or a tomb temple. And also, I think what many of us know, that in 2009 to 2010, there was a lot of controversy over the use of the word Allah. So during that time, many churches, Sikh temples, and mosques were attacked. So some of them were burned down, some of them some people threw Molotov bombs or bricks into their churches. But I don't think that this has occurred in recent years. So I think there was a lot of incidents in 2010. But so far, not so much, not anymore. Also, we highlighted the situation in Myanmar. So this one has been in the news in recent weeks, particularly the situation of Muslim communities in northern Rakhine. Their situation is very much interlinked with the issue of citizenship. So many people say that they are stateless persons and they are deprived of access to government services, or excluded from the local economy, face obstacles to family development. Also in 2012 and in 2014, there were news reports of widespread violence or riots between Muslims and Buddhists. So around 200 people to 240 people were reported to have been killed during that time, and thousands of people were displaced. And then we also highlight the situation in Indonesia, particularly the Ahmadiyya Muslims. So there was a fatwa that was issued that declared them outside of Islam, and consequently there were calls for them to be banned. So there were attacks on mosques and other properties. So in Indonesia, what we need to point out is that it's a very big country. So it doesn't mean that Ahmadiyya Muslims are persecuted all throughout the country. Instead, this situation is particularly manifested in West Java and in West Nusa Tenggara. And then also, there were reports of persecution against Shia Muslims with violent attacks against their properties and against their persons, particularly in East Java. And then lastly, we highlight the situation of the aliran kepercayaan, or the indigenous religions. Because in Indonesia, there are only six world religions that are recognized. So the implication is that if you are not part of those six world religions, such as the aliran kepercayaan or the indigenous religions, then you might have difficulty in registering your religion in your ID card. So this has several implications. This might make it difficult for you to register your marriage, or this might make it difficult for you to get your children's birth registered. All right. And also, we highlighted Brunei. Although we noted that there were no incidences with regard to violent conflict, but we flagged Brunei because of the possible challenge that it faces once it fully implements the Sharia Penal Code Order of 2013, because we are curious to see how would it impact on the right of freedom of religion, not only of the followers of Islam, but also of non-Muslims. For instance, apostasy would be outlawed, so you cannot convert out of Islam. And it's also punishable by death by stoning. Also, for blasphemy, it covers both Muslim and non-Muslims. So if you have been found to insult the Prophet, you could be sentenced to death or to a maximum of 30 years imprisonment and 40 strokes if you do not repent. Okay, so from all these examples of religious conflict or discrimination, the report tried to draw out what factors influence persecution or discrimination. So the first factor that the report highlights, and what it thinks is very important, is the politicization of religion. So politicization of religion happens when politicians or political parties invoke political discourse for political aims. As Excellency Ong Keng-yong earlier said, that we feel strongly about religion, and it's very easy for politicians to exploit our religious feelings to gain votes, to discredit our opponent, or to just gain popularity or credibility. So and it's also very dangerous when politicians engage in this practice, because if there are groups affiliated to your religion that start to manifest extremist views, then you might say that, never mind, let them go, because they're with my affiliation. They're of the same religion. I don't want to say anything bad about them. And also another factor that the report highlights is ethno-religious nationalism. So ethno-religious nationalism has been defined as a social movement that claims to speak in the name of the nation, and that nation is defined in terms of religion. So if you are somebody of a different faith, you're not merely somebody who follows who believes in a different God, but you could be seen as a national traitor. For instance, I could say, although it's not the case, but just as an example, I could say that to be truly Filipino is to be a Christian, or I could say that to be truly Cambodian, I need to be a Buddhist. So what this creates is that it creates division among people. It creates political animosity in such a way that you are going to say that if you follow a different belief, then you are not really a nationalist. And then we highlight also, lastly, weak rule of law. So this one manifested usually in periods of transition, as what happened in Indonesia during the reformacy in 1998, and what has happened recently in Myanmar after the move towards democratization in 2011. So after a sustained period of authoritarianism, a state moves towards democratization, and they allow private magazines, private newspapers to operate. People are given freedom of speech, and now you have the internet where people can say anything that they want on Facebook. Then some religious extremists can use this opening space, this newly open space, to incite hatred. And so, especially when you come from an authoritarian state, the state cannot anymore use the old means to clamp down on this activity. So some people have used this opening up of democratic space to spread religious dissent. And another issue with regard to weak rule of law, even if there's no move from authoritarianism to democratization, is an equal application of the law. You might have a law that protects well, but then you might have regions, for instance in Indonesia, where it's implemented differently or it's interpreted differently by regional officials or village officials. Okay, so good as promises, good practices, because we want to highlight that. We have good practices in ASEAN, it's not all bad. Okay, so the first one that we highlight is grassroots mobilization. So we ask, is grassroots mobilization a force for good or a force for bad? Because as I mentioned earlier, with the proliferation of the internet and people being able to spread their message through the internet and through Facebook especially, we know that, for instance, in Myanmar, that some of the riots, for instance, were fueled by accounts on Facebook that were inflammatory or that incited hatred. But the other part of that is that you can use social media, you can use videos on YouTube to also spread a message of tolerance. So an example of this is the Pansagar movement in Myanmar. That's why he has the flower in his mouth, because they are saying that flower, it's called the flower speech. Pansagar means the flower speech, because they try to educate and spread message on the perils of hate speech. So they said that let's be careful with our mouths to avoid spreading hatred. And also this was the report also in Malaysia also recognized this, that with the wide use of the internet, people are able to spread, advocate for human rights. And then also we highlight the role of religious leaders and religious organizations that advocate for moderation and for tolerance. So the religious organization and religious leaders must show that they are willing to cooperate with other religious groups. They must show that they recognize freedom of religion for all and not only of their own. And we highlight here the Muhammadiyah and the Nahdlatul Ulama in Indonesia, because I mentioned earlier the Ahmadiyya. The report noted that although the NU and the Muhammadiyah disagreed with the theology behind the Ahmadiyya, but they did not violently attack them, physically violently attack them, although they did engage in civil debates. And also more recently, the Nahdlatul Ulama started in 2015 to vocally advocate against the ideology of the Islamic State. So for instance, they created a video showing that the argument of the Islamic State, their interpretation of the Quran and of the Hadith, is theologically wrong. And then we also highlighted community engagement. I think Excellency Ong Keng-yong already described this very adequately earlier, but although the country reports cite many examples of community engagement, what we noted was that there's not a lot of faith-based FBOs who operate at the regional level. So this is the inspiration for this activity. How do we get them to spread their message of peace and to encourage solidarity, unity, and moderation at a more regional level? Because what we noted in the ASEAN is that I may be of a majority religion in my country, but my religion could be the minority in another country. So for instance, in Indonesia, Islam may be the dominant religion, but in Myanmar it is the minority religion. So how do we use that to build solidarity? And then we highlighted government-mediated interfaith dialogue. And here we would like to highlight some factors. With regard to government-mediated dialogue, the government must be seen as a neutral arbiter. So you have to show that you're not seeking to favor one religion over the other. You must mediate disputes fairly. And then another important factor is that all major religions must be involved as stakeholders, and not only must they be represented, but you have to make sure that the person that you invite from one religion is a legitimate representative of that religious group. So this creates a high level of trust, so that and then we highlighted particularly the example of Singapore because these dialogues occur in Singapore even without disputes occurring. So the hope is that when disputes do occur, you already have established a level of trust that would allow communities and faith-based groups to deal with each other. And then finally, we highlight good governance. So we noted that politicization of religion is being resorted to by political organizations and politicians when they lose the support of the electorate. And we would like to argue that a government that governs well, or a politician that promises good governance will not need to pit one religion against the other. So for instance, to highlight the most recent election in the Philippines, the president-elect ran on a platform of fighting corruption and fighting criminality. True that human rights advocates are saying that his measures are drastic, but that's a discussion for another day. But he even said that he would give a chance for the minority religion in the country, the Muslims, to dialogue with them and to engage with them to resolve their issues with regard to their drive, their move for autonomy in southern Mindanao. So we are saying that a clean government, or a government or a political party that promises good governance will not need to exploit religious feelings. So with that, I'd like to thank you all very much, and I hand over back to you, Ati. Okay, thank you.